I have the pleasure to introduce the next speakers who are part of the Biomass with Malin, Lobell and Janna Holmstedt. They are engaged in artistic co-creation and research based on multi-species encounters with plants and seeds and microbes. Now we'll have the pleasure to take part of their presentation. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Lena, and the NOBA team to having us here. Yeah, I think I do. Yes, we will actually go for these 4 sisters for Planthroposcene and Humus Economicus, 2 projects that we're working with. So it's an example of our expertise or practice. But we will start with inviting another guest to the room, the stinging nettle. And then I have some help from the team to take this guest in here and start serving you. The stinging nettle has been following us humans for a long time, and in Scandinavia since the Stone Age. And why we want to have this voice into the room is, as Robin Wall Kimmerer so beautifully tells, that plants speaks in a tongue that every breathing thing can understand. Plants teach in a universal language, food. And we are talking and singing a lot of, like you said in Daniel before, here we have this taste we need to take into the body of listening to the nettle. It's interesting to hear in the name of this stinging nettle in English. Net comes from the fishing net, or that you can see that it was used in the Stone Age to caught fishes and making fibers and so from the nettle. The nettle is also, it's a good plant feeder, it's good for the soil, it's also good and healthy and nutritious for us. So it's like have a lot of multi-purpose, so it's therefore we have this guest tonight. Yeah, so you are now served the stinging nettle, and just let it fill you. Talk to you in their own voice. Meanwhile, we started to presenting.
Yes. So while you smell and taste and take in this other voice, let us tell you a story to give you a sense of how we work and think together, where plants can act as mediators to soils. It takes a whole garden to raise a human, you might say. For the group exhibition, Sustainable Societies for the Future, the Art Museum wanted an artist that worked with gardens. The exhibition would start in January and run to May, and that's not ideal conditions for a garden. Sustainable Societies for the Future. Our response to the invitation was that it has to start with a gift. A garden is not a thing, it's a scene where relations come into view. A place to rehearse, to try things out, and we want to think with the seasons and the local resources. And the artwork must continue beyond May and the closing of the exhibition, because this is a matter of invisible work performed by soils and a multi-species community of soil workers. It's a scene for thinking about what stories we tell, what metaphors we live by, a place for practicing not control, but following. So this is what we offer, to think with the garden as a Planthroposcene and the artwork as an almanac. And you, the institution, need to take care of this scene through its many seasonal changes. And that's easier said than done, because who's going to do the care work? Is there even place and time for care?
We called the work Four Sisters for Planthroposcene, and that was inspired by two writers, Kimre, that we mentioned before, and also Natasha Meyer. The Four Sisters, you can say it started from this old indigenous companion planting technique with three sisters. But Kimre mentioned also, can we look at human as the fourth sister? And in this exhibition with Sustainability Societies for the Future, the role was also to see as we are the problem in this situation we are today. How can we rethink and reflect over our situation as a fourth sister? So in this exhibition, we also wanted to look at and have connection with local farmers and growers in and around Malmö, Lund, where this exhibition was taking place, and also celebrate actually the work that they were doing. The Planthroposcene we wanted to see, as Natasha Meyer talks about, it's more a new era, like an Anthropocene. No, it's not a new era like the Anthropocene, sorry, but an invitation to see and seed new modes of living and collaborating with plants. We need new scenes where relations can be reconsidered. And we wanted to have the garden, as Janna said, as a scene to act from and within. And during this season that this work was taking form, we had this almanac and different kind of occasions programs during the year, where we started with the gift, and then came the soil celebration, the School of the Plants, the Harvest Festival, and at the end in the autumn, in November, it's time for rest and respiration.
Yes, and each season inspired new ceremonies and playful rituals. And to start with the gift then, it implies to start with the stories, practices, and the ancestry of seeds. And before a garden existed outdoors, we made an installation for the seeds indoors from January to May. And as a curious fact, scientists have discovered that sounds in the frequency range around 200 Hz help maize seeds to germinate. So here they are indoors, bathing in sound, waiting to be planted. And the film shows where the mother plants come from, where they grew the previous season in a Three Sisters companion planting. So it's maize, beans, and squash. And we also, in that installation, told the long history of maize. That goes back almost 10,000 years. Its indigenous ancestry, which is very different from the kind of monocrop we're used to see, the yellow corn. And these seeds were later planted in the garden, in the courtyard of the museum. And this house that you see in the installation was also moved outside to the courtyard.
Yes, and then when we planted out these Three Sisters, it was in May, and it was time for the School of Plants. It was not only the Three Sisters companionship that we wanted to focus on here, also to find other ways of companionships in the garden, as, for example, perennial systems adapted to Nordic conditions, inspired by agroforestry. And on the picture here, we have two helpers in the garden. You can say the comfrey and the sea buckthorn, for example, that take a nitrogen from the air, like the sea buckthorn, and the comfrey is more with its deep roots taken up and make available the nutrition for other plants. So two kind of helpers. But it was also occasion to look at what we can learn from plants that have been here for millions of years, longer than us, and actually to see the relationship back again to the fourth sister, to see what we can do as this fourth sister, our role in the whole garden, and also learn from the plants that has these, they can't run away. They have really good problem solvers due to this situation. And we, like other animals with brains and organs. We are very good at running away from the problems. So what can we learn from that? And you can see like the Four Sisters role, you can say that we are, to see our advantage in this situation as gardeners, for example, we are fast, we can move our feet, and we can run for water if the water lingers. We can also put leaves and compost if the wind blows it away and leave the bare ground. We can divide and spread the seeds and plants that we have ended up to dense planting. The fourth sister runs back and forth while the other sisters in the garden, the plants or anchor, grow together, grow downward, upward, and capture light and bind in carbon. They're building these underground networks that we not are able to see, running back and forth too quickly, but their exhalation becomes our inhalation, and our exhalation becomes their inhalation, so this close relationship between us. And then we went further to the harvest feast.
Yes, and in our almanac, as we thought of it, this is where ripeness turns into rottenness, and it's our chance to harvest the fruits of all the labor that has been done, not only by us, of course, before the food turns into soil once more. But it's also a time for listening, through inhaling, smelling, consuming and drinking the voices of plants.
So back in time, because the harvest is in the autumn, but this seminar and symposium is focusing on soil, and that was, of course, earlier in springtime. We have this soil celebration that also put the ground for this installation in the springtime. And then we wanted to connect to, this was during pandemic time as well, so we could invite people to the castle or this museum. But that was a very good point. So we can go out and meet different kind of farmers, growers, community gardeners, and so on around the area. And we wanted them to share their soil stories or soil relations with us. And then we brought them back, in a way, to the garden site at the museum.
So we made coins together. They donated their soil and made a coin. And while doing that, we shared soil stories with each other.
Yeah, and that was actually, at this Malmöhus castle, had once a time been a site for a more conventional coin production that lead us into this reclaiming economy, in a way. So just show you. Excuse me.
No, not yet.
No? Oh, sorry.
Sorry. So we could just say that often we meet like a response that, oh, but local gardens or urban farming is not the solution to the problem. But we don't present this as a design solution. It's a method for working with localized soils as scenes and almanacs, more to create connection and a sense of belonging than solving a food crisis problem, but a way of relating again, a way of undisciplining, disciplinary modes of thinking also. And we continue to work with the value of soil and the reevaluation of soils. Soiling economy, you could say. We can show a very short film that plays around with language and words. So it reads from Homo economicus to Humus economicus. suggesting that we move from rational man to an economy of soil. And our work in the art collective has also merged and joined forces with other researchers along the way, and especially in the art and research project Humus Economicus, that looks on soil blindness and the value and future of soils in urbanized landscapes. And the project, it's based at the National Historical Museums in Sweden, in Stockholm, and it inquires into how radically the human-soil relations have changed. Maybe you heard the expression plant blindness. That was introduced by Wandersee and Schlusser in 2001, and we suggest that urbanized societies suffer from soil blindness, and this is an absence of understanding for the ecological, social, cultural, and historical relations, also the spiritual relations that soils are embedded in, and the diversity that they provide and strive through. And this blindness results in a backgrounding of soils in society, as Other has spoken about today as well. And it also results in a reduction of soils to a set of separate functions or ecosystem services. So the complexity and vitality of living soils and also of soil knowledges are edited out of the story. And we speak from a global north perspective now, and especially a Swedish perspective, where the urban have been defined in opposition to the rural, and soil figure as a mere resource for human use and exploitation. And at the same time, soil ties together political ecologies into conflict zones, where it's not easy to tell apart what's nature and what is culture. So soil, in a very beautiful way, gathers how the relationality of it all, that we can't think in separate categories when we turn to soil, and that's also one thing that we can learn from soils, I think. So we try to stay with all these troubles as we approach soil as a living multi-species heritage passed on to several humans and also non-human generations. So the project combines issues of public space, of communal experiences, and of biological processes to see how soil blindness might be counteracted. Can we soil the city anew? Can we soil the conception of what heritage is? And this includes curating art and science informed interventions to train our minds to go visiting, as Hannah Arendt once said. So this leads us to another soil celebration that we did earlier this year in April again, that took place as another Swedish castle that also have a monetary history. So the Swedish Minister of Finance used to live here at the end of the 1800s. And outside his stables, we did a full-day performance where we transformed a manure heap into a money stack and invited the audience to help us do all these coins during one day. And the capital had been accumulated by the horse Konrad, and microbial investors had been hard at work for a long time. And the money stack was donated and transported to the kitchen garden, followed by a little carnival of soil critters, kids wearing masks that they painted in a micro painting workshop during the day as well. And it was installed as a temporary sculpture to be reinvested in the soil eventually. And as part of the program, we also invited an economist to talk about ecological economy and how we can think economy otherwise as embedded in soils. And we'll end with the last part of our almanac. It's rest, respiration, and also reconsideration, since this symposium fittingly occurs at a time when it's time for rest and reflection and decomposition.
And this, for us, this season is also an invitation to attend to the creatures below ground. And we're in the process of creating a microbe cinema that we'll be working with next year, with and without moving images. And we are collaborating with Jenny Salmson, a permaculturist, and Ellen Ingham student, who has initiated us into the world of microscopes. Here we have the dance of a dying nematode. And we have also started a collaboration with a Swedish researcher at Lund University, Edith Hammer, and her team that have constructed a soil ship, or a cyber soil that's half artificial and half natural construction. Some kind of, she explains it like a window to the ground. The problem with study soil that Erik and so on, of course, knows about is that, yeah, you split up or you disturb the environment. The difficulties to study what's in there. But it feels like Edith and her team's, this soil ship will make it easier to really have the whole environment undistracted. And then we will end with a little story, like if the natural was there in the beginning. We also met this rotifer, the hibernation animal, and a story that struck me when I read about these Russian scientists that found when the permafrost was melting up in Siberia, they found this 24,000-year-old rotifer that has been dormant for so long time, and then waking up, reproduce itself, and yeah, and what can we learn and inspire from that in this way of saving energy is a big issue around the world right now, for example. So what can we learn and develop from this little rotifer and other animals like that? It's also, I mean, the big bears, and they are also found from the fossils from the dinosaurs. The ones that survived this fifth mass extinction was also this hibernal animal. So who is surviving the next one? That was
what is the gift of the rotifer?
Yeah,
what can we learn from the rotifer, and could we engage with some torpor thinking, maybe?
That was what we wanted to say today. Thank you for listening. So, any questions or comments or things?
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much for your presentation. It made me really think about the Humus Economicus, how much our relationship with soil and land is being shaped by patriarchy, and how much it was important for patriarchy to create gender, create structures, and also implement a very rigid hierarchy. Specifically, I start to think about the advent of marriage, how that was created to unify lands, and how land was seen as a property, and that thus this understanding of property extended to women, and how it just starts to come, these images as I start to see it, and start to see these coins made of money, and how that also, in a sense, made us feel completely separate from it. You know, like, I just wanted to ask your perspective around patriarchy and then this relationship with soil and land.
Absolutely. I mean, just short, interesting point. It's really like in a bigger perspective of this land ownership and land reforms. Also, if we go to the agriculture or everything, it has been like that ownership and structure. When this with the coin and economy, I don't know how clear we was about that. It's actually started as a way to reclaiming this economy that actually has to do with taking care of resources, and how economy has been so much about the capitalism or the money, the coins, so a way of what is value, the value thing, and using language from economy like näringslivs.
Yes, a lot of things there that can't be translated because it's like Swedish puns. But yes, in Old Greek, the oikonomy is the root word for both ecology and economy, as you might know. And it's the art of the oikos, the home. And if you expand the notion of home into a multi-species home, it was also clear for the Greeks that, well, even if they didn't include the multi-species, economy or oikonomy was very much about ethics. And economy today has gotten rid of ethics. It's an outside of economy. So by playing around with the language of economy, it's a way to reclaim the root of economy as already ecologically embedded. But then I also think of another interesting aspect in terms of gender and soil. And talking about who's feeding the world, it's small farmers, smallholders that feed the world. Statistically, 50% of the food produced is produced by smallholders, and they are usually women. But what we see are these huge monocultures, but that's not usually for human consumption. And if we rethink or queer the agrarian history, you see that there's a spectrum from the kitchen garden to the field. And the kitchen garden is a knowledge world on its own. And that was a female domain where a lot of different knowledges mingle, where you have textile, you have medicine, you have magic, all mingled together. So the kitchen garden was not necessarily only for food production. And that part of the agrarian history is written out of the story when we focus on agriculture history and only looking to fields. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think also what you mentioned in your talk about the decay or the breaking up of binaries is a very important lesson to learn from soil, I think, to start to break down the binary thinking and metabolize knowledge differently.
Thank you very much. This was what we need in our society. If you go that way, you had to work a lot of these things, because I think you are in the point to the economic way of living. And you have a mission here in the future to get out with that, what you think and how to do it in that way. Thank you very much. Inspired me very much.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, we've been thinking around how to soil conceptions. We like this ambivalence that is in soiling. There's both defecating, but it's also about bringing back the dirt that is not dirt, bringing back the processes and being aware of processes. And the soil blindness is expressed in different ways, in different contexts, of course. And it's not a complete soil blindness, it's a partial soil blindness. It's expressed in one way in urban planning, in another way in heritage, in a third way when we talk about sustainability. So how can we soil different things together in different areas?
Yes, thanks a lot for your presentation. I'm coming from a landscape architecture background, and I have this major question about the topic of urban soils, because I feel like what you've shown there, that's not really what I would consider being urban soil. For me, that is kind of a healthy working soil, just taken from a, kind of inserted in an urban context. Whereas, it's just like an implementation of something that's working somewhere else. Whereas I think the real problem we're struggling with is, for example, there's also soil underneath all the sealed ground in our cities. And what's actually happening with that soil? Is there strategies how to bring life back to this? I mean, there is still life in it. There's still hope. But I was just wondering if you also had some thoughts about this topic of the site in the city.
You remind me about, that was one question we had to Edith Hammer and Håkan Wallander, another soil scientist. What's happening? Is there life under this asphalt or concrete in the city? Or how can we, how long time? Otherwise you said that it takes a long time to build this little topsoil or living soil. But they gave a rather hopeful answer. They said that it actually, one thing is that it's more things actually living there, or maybe will be in this dormant state, not dead but not alive, just waiting for a better situation, and that it rather quickly, actually, if you give it the right situations, it comes to life. But that made me also, that I wanted to comment on Erik and Jörn's talk, that when you say that food comes from the ground, it begins in the ground or in the soil, that it also reminded me about that in the farmers, you said that you're not feeding the plants, you're feeding the soil. So the importance of putting organic material, or what's actually building the soil, is actually also the plants. So this importance of feeding the soil to get life back again. That was not maybe the answer to the city soil issue, but anyway, getting life back to a soil that's damaged in a way, or dormant, I don't know.
I could add to it that in the art and research project Humus Economicus, we're not looking at urban soils, but we're looking at soil blindness and values of soil in urbanized landscapes, and that extends far beyond the urban per se. But we're also working with Janna Lindblad, who's urban in urban studies. And there we have looked at what conceptions are there of soil in the city and in planning processes. And then it's very much about the surface value of soil as buildable, as sealable, you could say. Possible to seal, possible to build on. And when soils and ground are evaluated, all the cultural aspects, the historical aspects, the spiritual aspects, the communal aspects of soil are edited out. So soil is reduced to one function alone. So counteracting soil blindness becomes also about opening up this multiplicity of values that meet in the subject of soil and bring that into planning processes. So it's not only about planting, but gaining a deeper concern for soils in urban landscapes as well. If that answers some of your...
Yeah, I guess maybe it's just also a nice inspiration for you for the future to, think about what's actually there. And as you said, you want to learn from, for example, the plants in your garden, but then I guess you would try to have to start with what is there and what will emerge on site.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. So that's why the garden is not a solution of importing soil to a place. But when we speak about the Planthroposcene and the artwork as an almanac, it's if we would go to a very damaged soil in a very unattractive place, how do we use that as a scene? And what do we have to put into the almanac to help us think with soil to see what comes out of that? So it's more a method of approaching localized soils than importing a solution from somewhere else.
That's
so yeah,
actually-
thank you for
Yeah,
pointing
and
that out.
I just want, yeah, that's actually was not a good example then with this museum. But Janna knows how troubled I was about this, that they wanted me to do a project, actually also over years from the beginning. And then we was on this stone backyard or courtyard that was not the one place to be, but that's maybe a part of this having a commission in a way, or exhibition problematic or institutional problems actually. So
all the negotiations behind the scene that Daniel
lots of
also pointed to, that it takes
absolutely.
a lot of work to get an institution to work with living materials.
Yeah, for
So
sure,
it was
and
a
I'm
lot
really
of
grateful.
Strangle for that, to extend the thing and how to work, and so also to have an art institution that this was not used to work with living materials or gardens or taking care, the care workers, how to work with this kind of material or way of working, not placing an object somewhere. And so it was a rather unusual way for them to work as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. Thanks a lot. I
So-
think you're doing a good job, though.
Longing for a Planthroposcene, that's actually...
It's not fair. I mean, I'm coming from a landscape architecture background, and I'm thinking a lot like, what is the garden of the 21st century? And
It's actually in, just a very short comment on that. In landscape architect program in Malmö, that a landscape architect has gone through this to have a park planning that's not planned to the end. I think it's called the future park. So I think that's very unusual. That's maybe the 21st park. To be able that this park should be developed during so long time, so it's have no end. I don't know how she got that through with the planners in the city, but it's interesting.
thanks a lot.
Okay, thank you. I think our time is out. Janna, take this little voice with you, please. Thank you. So,
Thank you
okay.
so much.